I've enlisted the help of hubby A to hold the camera so that I can demonstrate this part. I've applied I'll just get the icing off that. It's a little star nozzle. It's a 24. And what I'm doing is a pattern that you could use for leaves and things as well. But I start off pressing an amount out, dragging it forward, pushing it down hard and pulling. Push down, pull, push down, pull. What I mean by push down is I'm actually squeezing quite hard to release a lot of the icing out in one go. So push, pull it out, push it hard, pull it out, and this way you're going to get that bunching effect and then it drags out. And I'm sort of pushing the nozzle back. So it's coming out, it's like a backwards and forwards motion. I'm dragging it out really far there and giving you a different pattern, but just so that you can see how that pattern's working. That's quite pretty on the side as well. I don't know whether you can capture that. That's quite nice for another type of cake design, and I might use that pattern when I join it on top. And you want to hope that you're getting it as even as possible. I know some of mine aren't perfect here. Okay. Here I'm actually up to assembling the windows onto the gingerbread house. And you can see that I've just piped a little bit of icing there. And I'm just going to pop that straight onto it. Press it down a little bit and leave those to set. I'm actually going to put a little bit of decoration around the outside of the windows as well, just to finish it off a little bit more. And all the rest of the decoration that I'm planning on doing for the house, I'll do when it's actually upright, because that'll help glue the rest of the gingerbread house to the base and make it a little bit more solid as well. The next step that I'm moving on to is working on the front and back panels. And again, I'm only going to do a little bit of work on these. This will be the front, and I'm going to make the door out of this. Make sure you leave a little gap here, because when you attach the whole gingerbread house to the base of the plate or the covered board or whatever it is, whatever surface you're using to display your gingerbread house on, I like to have a little bit of space so that I can paint a path. And what I found is every time I put it down here, I'd end up covering half the door with icing, and I'd have a really dodgy looking little door. So I prefer to move it up a little bit higher, and I'm going to create a star wreath on the house for the front of the house. And on the back of the house, I've got one more window to pop on the back here, and I'm going to leave the rest fairly plain and just decorate it with some lollies. So now I've piped that outside design around the window frames, and you can see that there's sometimes you get these little daggy bits that point off where you finished your icing. You can just push those down with a clean finger. When they're sort of half dry, they'll push down a lot more easily, and just push them into shape so that they're not pointing out too much. Over here, you can see that I've finished the design for the star, and I've just gotten the icing part way dry. And the reason why I haven't put the lollies straight into wet icing is because they're quite heavy. The heavier the lolly, the icing needs to be half dry in order for them to stick properly. Otherwise, what you find is that they'll roll off or get too sludgy, and your lollies will fall off the design. Now, in terms of what sort of design or how much icing decoration to put onto something, well, that just comes down to experience. of making lots of different gingerbread houses and sort of figuring out what style you actually like. Often what I like to do is just Google up a whole heap of different images that other people have done and get some ideas from that. And really it's just trial and error to seeing what you actually like. Each year I really try and do something different. Otherwise I end up just producing the same sort of looking gingerbread house year after year. And I think it's nice to challenge yourself and try something different, because that's the only way you're actually going to improve and get better, is to take risks and try something new. And I will still take risks and try something new even with a humble gingerbread house. It all counts towards something. So I'll finish off the door and we'll move on to the next phase of the gingerbread house assembly. Now I'm ready to start assembling and putting together the gingerbread house. The most important thing to have with the assembly of it are bamboo skewers. You can buy them in 2 sizes or just cut down the really long ones, or satay skewers they're called. I managed to find these little cocktail ones, which are quite good, and they're going to be used as scaffolding to hold different parts of the house together, particularly the roof. The icing that I've placed around the outside edge here and at the bottom of the house, I've placed that on just using 2 motions, bringing it across and bringing it back to make it quite thick and sturdy. If you just pop 1 line of icing, I find it doesn't tend to stick as well. So once you've piped it all on, let it sit there for a little while so that it can half set. I haven't put any icing onto the plate. I've just chosen to use this decorative Christmas plate. You could use any plate, or even just cover a piece of cardboard with aluminium foil or silver foil, or any other sort of decorating paper that you wanted to use. I'm just choosing to use a plate because I know that this plate will fit in a carrier, depending on how high you end up making your gingerbread house. But this way I'm not going to worry that things are going to knock into it when we're transporting it to my mum's for Christmas this year. I'm sorry that I couldn't show you the first 2 steps because a certain person went away and I've only got 1 pair of hands and I needed both hands to try and hold it together. But what I'll do is try and explain what I've done. I showed you before that I had the icing on the individual pieces of the cake, and what I did is I started holding this piece and placed this container in the middle like so, and squish them down onto the plate upright and sort of lean them in towards each other and sort of pinched it in so that they formed a slight TP effect, if you get what I mean, so that it would lean into the middle. I then piped icing on the side here and on the other side, and if you can also see down the inside, and squish that on. Now what I'm going to do, before I add the final piece, which is the front part of the gingerbread house, I'm actually going to reinforce all of that icing onto the cake. Now, it doesn't have to be neat work here because this is not the decorative part. This is just the bits that glue it together. So I'm just going to try and hold the camera together without shaking it too much, but you can see that I've just cemented, it's almost like cementing it in. And down in here also, I'm adding a bit more. It does look a little bit lopsided, and I'll straighten that up as soon as I've got more icing for it to sit into, and that side's going to fall. Sorry. And I'm also going to pipe in the inside and wipe it clean so that it sticks. And what I mean by wiping it clean is just sort of pushing it and smearing it together so that it forms a bit of a better seal. And I'm going to do that around all of the edges. Okay, so I've added a couple of candy canes to the top of the windows, and you can see that I've attached the rest of the front door area on. I've cemented or sort of put the rest of the icing together onto all the edges, as well as inside all the creases of the cake. That I've actually got to pipe a little bit more in there just to hold it together. And all the inside edges have all been sealed. And now that needs to set before you put the roof on. So if you wanted to do any other decoration on the gingerbread house, this is the time to do it. And I find what works really well is if you place a lot more heavier work sort of along the base to give it a really solid foundation for the rest of the gingerbread house. This is quite a large gingerbread house, and the more, this is just from experience, the more decoration and the more icing you sort of sit at the bottom, the better it will be. You also need to be careful with how much decoration you choose to put on the roof. One year I put too many lollies, and it was just way too heavy for the house, and it collapsed. It didn't matter how much scaffolding I put onto it, it still collapsed. So it was a bit late when you leave it to the last minute. I'm actually recording this on the 23rd of December, and it's already 9:30. So at night, that's why I've gone for a much quicker approach to doing this gingerbread house compared to some of the others that I've done. So I'm going to let, like I said, all the rest of the white icing dry, and I'm just going to start decorating the rest of it, and then we'll be ready to place the roof on top. Actually, you could probably scaffold the roof now while you're waiting for the rest of it to dry. What I would recommend to do is pipe a line of icing here, another line of icing there, and then we're going to just place the sticks across, just like that. Okay, so I'll have all that preset for the next viewing.